Welcome to Baby Time at the Rampant Discourse YouTube channel. I'm your host, Paul Lesson.
I'm Andrew Riley.
And I'm Santa Travis Hudson.
Santa Hudson, what are we doing this fine evening?
All right, we're 5 days away from Christmas, if my math was right on that one. Or we have five days left of Advent. So we're closing in on the real home stretch of our beer Advent calendar from Costco because we're American. Uh, although is Costco America like only in America?
They have stores outside of America.
Yeah.
They are a U.S. business, though, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
They started in Washington State, and I would not be surprised if they have stores many places. But I wonder if their business model changes much in those other countries.
So other countries aren't as largesse oriented as we are. All right. This one very much intrigues me for every reason.
Every reason, wow.
You have a devil on the can,
And he's naked.
and it's Dunkles Weissbier, a dark white beer. What? Andrew, explain yourself.
So we are drinking the Graminger Kirta, which is brewed by the Dunkles Weissbier Company.
Oh,
Their
name is just an oxymoron.
We'll come back to that in a second here. This is a 5% ABV beer brewed in Graming, which is a very small town in the larger city area of Altötting, which is east of Munich and just north of Salzburg, so practically in Austria. This is a Dunkles Weissbier, which is going to be different from the. They brew two beers. Both are Hefeweizens. This is a Hefeweizen, and the other one is just a regular Hefeweizen. This one being a Dunkle Hefeweizen means that it is a dark Hefeweizen, which, as we can see as Paul is holding it up, we have a dark color like we did yesterday. A huge amount of head there. I'll pour mine in a moment. That's incredible.
That's what she said.
The thing that I found as I did a little research on this brewery is that this is a woman-owned brewery. So most of the places that you're going to go in and get beers from, the master brewer.
What she said.
It is what she said. The master brewer is a guy who spent a lot of time training to be a master brewer. These women are all in charge of this brewery, and they've decided that they really like the Hefeweizens, and they have two beers, a regular Hefeweizen and this Dunkle Hefeweizen. But their slogan that I read on the webpage was "Wenn Frauen brauen," which is hilarious because it means literally when the women are brewing.
So break it down then. Hefeweizen. What? Because isn't Weiss white?
Weiss is white, and Hefeweizens are typically like a white because unless you are malting them heavily, Hefeweizens are going to be lighter than your normal barley wine, barley beers, because the barley just means that it's going to have that darker color. But this one in particular has obviously been malted in such a way that it is going to be very dark. The malting white wheat is light. It's one of the reasons I think also that our American beers, especially since they're adding the rice nowadays, but even historically have been much lighter. The hops in the malting process are much lower in our processes in American beer, so a little bit different.
And so you say darker. I'm like, and yes, it's obviously shades darker, but
Still,
it's not like the what did we have yesterday? It's not like the smoke beer
no.
or a Bock or something like that. It's a dark it's a dark Hefeweizen. Yeah.
So this beer actually shows exact. If you had one directly in front of you, you can't see unfortunately in what we're looking at because if you look at mine, it looks dark, right? But the amount of light that's shining through it on our cameras versus what's actually showing it in person is slightly different. This beer shows very clearly a phenomenon of color that I found to be very surprising, and I learned fairly recently. Our perception of color and our representation of color in computers and on paper is highly complicated. There's a whole lot of color theory. I think at one point we started talking about black and whites are the first colors you see, historically speaking, that any culture is able to differentiate, and then red comes along fairly shortly after, and that blue is seen very late. Brown, for example, which this is a brown, a tan brown. It's a very complicated color. Colors are made up of a hue and a saturation. That's one way of looking at color theory. And so if you look at the hue of brown, you can saturate brown to more or less effect and have a higher or lower intensity of brown. And low intensity brown, the closer you get to black, is darker brown, obviously. And so then the question is, what is lighter brown? Well, I thought that light brown was tan. And that's true in the sense that tan is a lighter brown than dark brown. But tan is really kind of like the midpoint. You can go lighter than tan. So what is brown still in the saturation point, in the hue point, but saturated less?
Oh, that was a question?
Yeah.
It's invisible.
And again, you can't see it, but Travis has got his shows it a little bit better. The color there, that is a lower saturation or higher saturation, I should say, because it's the amount more light is coming through brown, and it's trending towards orange. Orange is whoa, jeez, wow.
I was gonna try to shine a light at it, but that was a bad idea.
The orange as a color is actually very, very light brown, and so these beers have sort of an orangish color to them, I would say, and that's true. We call them yellow, but in a lot of ways they're actually just sort of a weird off-kilter orange in a certain way. So that's going to be especially true with something like this, I think. I haven't had a sip yet. I'm really interested in getting to this, but I do want to just correct myself from something I said yesterday that was incorrect. I said that a strike where non-union members struck was a wildcat strike. That is absolutely incorrect. A wildcat strike is a strike where union members strike, but do so without a authority and representation by their union bosses. So the people in charge of the union don't call the strike, but the workers strike anyway. That is a wildcat strike. A non-union strike is a little more complicated. It can still happen. A person or group of people who decide to strike individually or collectively without having a union first is perfectly legal, and it has the usual ramifications that you might expect of not showing up to work for some day. But if you do it collectively, if you've got a workplace of 10 people and 8 of them decide we're just not coming to work anymore because we're upset about these business practices that our boss is doing, you get some de facto protections. It's if you were in a union, even though you hadn't gone through the formal union process, but it's really, really dangerous, right? So don't do it, even though you may get some of those protections automatically. But that is not the wildcat strike. Just wanted to correct myself on that.
Well, I have to imagine that even in the case where you would have a union, getting to the point where you feel like negotiations have broken down and you just don't come into work for a couple of days, and you convince a bunch of your coworkers not to come into work either. That feels like it really poisons the well of the workplace. Like, I've never worked. I guess I shouldn't say that. I haven't often worked at a job location that has a union, and I don't know. Like, it just, so much of my work experience has involved relative harmony between the employers and the employees, and it's hard for me to think of working every day, 40 hours a week, in an environment where there's this inherent tension and this adversarial relationship between the employer and the employees. I understand that's probably the case in a lot of places, and this is a little bit of maybe white collar bias on my part, but it seems so foreign, and I don't know, not the greatest situation. And again, I'm not blaming the workers at all or the unions. It just seems like the whole situation is a bad one, right? Like on both sides. There has to be a better way.
Andrew, I'm sure, has much more lucid thoughts on this than I do, but one quick reaction I have is, since you mentioned white collar, like traditionally, thinking more factory, but I'll use blue collar. Slight tangent. Is something like a plumber considered blue collar?
Yeah, a plumber would be blue collar.
Okay, so I don't know if I necessarily want to put them in there, but I'm thinking more in terms of like the guy in the Amazon factory or in the Ford factory, or like he's just a cog in a machine, and there the employer does kind of have might still have the attitude nowadays of like, you're replaceable, right? Mm-hmm. That, I guess that's what to me causes the adversarial relationship versus a white collar job. you've usually like shown some sort of unique skills or something that isn't as easily replaceable. So they almost have to be nicer to you, if it makes
Yeah.
sense that way.
No, yeah, I mean it makes perfect sense. I mean, I would imagine even even a cog in the machine, like you could be a good cog in the machine, right? Like you could be an efficient worker at the factory, or you could be someone who shows up late every day, sits on his ass like for half the time, takes excessive smoke breaks or whatever. So even then, I feel like there's still degrees of desirability
Right.
as a worker. But to your point, like that's not quite the same thing as being like, I have 20 years experience programming in whatever niche programming language you need, and there's only like three other people that you could possibly hire, and
Well,
yeah,
what
it's
what you
different.
kind of brought up. Sorry to keep talking over you, Andrew. If you have any points to be
I'll
making,
come
but
back to it, but you go for it, guys.
reminds me of sort of like the relationship of the people, because we all read Mouse and talked about it, right? Like that type of relationship of like you got to a certain point and like the guard, you kind of became, there were certain I forget what the name was, but they were kind of like they were in between the prisoners and the guards kind of thing, which
Well,
kind of means they're in the best of both worlds and the worst of both worlds, right? Like because neither side really likes them, but they're not mistreated by the higher side, so they kind of have it good.
and to clarify, since not everyone might know what Mouse is, Mouse was a graphic novel about the Holocaust,
Yes, I'm
and
talking about how
you
some
were
certain Jews got elevated in the concentration camps, not buddy buddy, but like kind of got elevated to almost leadership positions, and there's going to be some animosity of the other, in that case, inmates, I guess, like against the person who's kind of they perceive like, wait, you're kind of selling us out to save yourself. So
Mhm.
I imagine similar things happen in union structures too, like you were talking about yesterday about
Well,
the
and
leadership is serving them the peons.
and I mean, so there's also the freeloader problem, right? Like where, and I'm not super familiar, so Andrew, please feel free to correct me if you know otherwise. But there can be a scenario where, let's say 90% of a workforce is unionized, 10% decided no, I don't want to join the union, but the union might negotiate better, workplace benefits or whatever for the entire workforce.
Hmm.
You're getting the benefits of that union without having to pay the union dues.
Hmm.
And so other people will see that and be like, "Oh, well, why am I paying union dues if we can all get the benefits?" All of a sudden, no one's paying union dues. The union gets dissolved, and it's I'm sure there's a word for that. It's not the tragedy of the commons, but there's
It's very close to the
maybe
tragedy of
maybe
the
it's just
commons.
freeloader problem,
It's a
right?
freeloader problem, and that's one of the reasons why union shops often attempt to require every worker to join the union to prevent the freeloader problem. Because absolutely, there will be some group of people who principally don't want to be part of the union, and then there'll be some other percentage that see that opportunity provides them an opportunity to get even more money for themselves at no benefit, no risk to themselves, and that can cause union problems. And it actually was sort of the start of a lot of the right to work law movements, where people were saying, look, people shouldn't be forced to join the union to combat this. Everyone should needs the right to choose, and that ultimately got to the point where it meant that a lot of these right to work states didn't have strong unions or unions at all in a lot of situations. I mean, the whole thing is incredibly complicated, and there's always going to be bad actors on both sides. I grew up being very skeptical of unions and their ability to do much work that was productive, and very in favor of the right to work and saying no one should force me to be part of the union or to have this job. But I've become substantially more pro-union as I've aged. But I still recognize that this is a real problem because ultimately, if you do force members in, they don't have any control over it. They may get to have a vote, but we know how well voting works in democracy. I mean, we got Trump as president, right? Thank you very much. So at the end of the day, it's a hugely complicated problem that doesn't have easy solutions when there are bad people on all sides. Trump said there are good people on all sides, but there are also bad people on all sides.
Yeah, I wonder if there's been any research about people's opinions on unions changing as they age, right? Like you would think that I could see a scenario where people come out of, um, enter the workforce all idealistic, being like, oh yeah, like I'm looking forward to working for, Ben and what is it, Ben and Jerry's, or what is one of those companies that has a reputation of being like kind of hippies and treating all their employees right, and oh we'll all live together in harmony, and then reality sets in a little bit. You might get laid off once or twice. You might get mistreated by some employees once or twice, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what? Screw the screw the employers. Like they all suck. They're all out to exploit the working class, and it's reading a lot of Marxist texts, and all of a sudden you're a hardcore union supporter or whatever. Obviously not to quite that degree, but I wouldn't be surprised if, uh, yeah, I guess support for union. Although I don't know.
I can
Yeah,
see it
like
going the
I
other
can
way
see
as
it going
well.
either way.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be age related, but personal experience matters an awful lot.
Hmm.
And whether
Yeah.
you mentioned that you haven't had a situation where you've been working in many or any union shops. I've never worked in a union shop. It's never had come up where the work that I've been doing was in a union shop. Probably at least partially due to the fact that I work in Virginia and for Virginia-based companies for the most part, but also just due to the nature of the work that we're doing. As we were saying, it's less common to find white collar union workers, but it certainly does exist. So I could. I would consider teachers to be white collar workers, and they're unionized.
Yeah. Like it's probably more common when it comes to public sector unions, I imagine.
Something else I was going to mention about this union situation, I think related to the fact that individuals and non-unionized members got the ability to strike. So when I was doing a little bit of research on this, there were pieces of information I was pulling up about specific instances that had happened fairly recently, like fast food workers in their push to get a minimum wage of $15 or themselves a wage of $15 an hour decided to strike. And so what does that mean for if your entire shift of workers doesn't show up because they want $15 an hour instead of the 7.25 that is the federal minimum wage right now that you're paying them, that is potentially a legitimate strike. And if you terminate them all, you run into potential problems from the NLRB. Also, depending on how the strike goes, what you think, well, we'll strike for a day just to show them that we're serious, and then we'll come back to work. Single day strikes are actually very, very dangerous for the union. If you want to strike, you need to strike for real. Like, we're not coming back to work until we get what we want. If you just go in and out, or work for a day, not work for a day, the National Labor Review Board, NLRB, will completely come down on the side of the employer because it's basically like negotiating in bad faith.
That's so bizarre to me. Like I understand, I guess, to some degree, like
Yeah,
the rationale behind it, but
it's weird, huh?
it seems like one of those things where it's like, why is there? Are these even elected? Who's on this board? Is it elected? I mean, I know it's not elected. It must be appointed by the president. I
This
mean,
the federal government has so many cogs going on that we don't even know about most of them. Like last episode, we also talked about the pension and the pension guarantee company. It's a company, like they call it a company. Most people don't even know that it exists, and yet it's a function of our federal government.
well, I mean, the Federal Reserve, like, I mean, why am I completely blanking on his name right now? Jerome
Independent.
Powell. Yeah, like it's crazy to me that like the chairman of the Federal Reserve is considered to be like an independent, uh, non-governmental actor when he's like appointed by the president, and it's totally like a cartel of the major banks. And I mean, don't get me started. Like I'll go all Ron Paul on you, and we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, you need to
Even
go
if
all
you,
Paul on us.
yeah, I'll go all Ron Paul lesson on you all. But it's just, yeah, it's crazy. Like I don't know how you can get away with saying that they're like a non-governmental actor. Didn't I say I wasn't going to talk as much because of the
We started talking politics.
yeah that,
I was gonna say, I can't even remember how we got back on unions.
That was my fault
Like,
because I made a mistake about the Wildcat, so I had to correct it.
Do we want to talk about the beer at all?
Yeah.
I had one thing I wanted to say, and I think I had this comment with the previous beer, and maybe it was the Zelda beer. I don't know, but it smelled a little. The aroma to me reminded me a little bit of cream soda, and I know I said that before about another beer, and I can't remember which one it was, but that was my first thought. I like the aroma, and the taste also a little bit like cream soda to me, which may not sound like it's that appealing in the beer, but I don't know. That was my first thought, first and second thought.
I'll just say that this beer stands out with a sweetness. Um,
Hmm.
so that's the
Maybe that's why I think it's
Yeah,
cream soda.
it's very very sweet, which is the malt coming through here, and it's a sweetness and malty flavor that I don't expect out of Hefeweizens. This goes back to it being a Dunkel Weizen. Um, it's interesting, and I'm gonna reserve any further comments for the moment.
I'm just going to warn you right now, Andrew, that based on your previous description of the beer, if you give this one a thumbs down, it's pretty obvious that you're a sexist.
I don't know. He might not be able to vote for something with a devil that's not showing up in total clarity.
The naked devil eating a pretzel.
We'll turn it around to the front because the double against the orange is kind of clear too, and he's eating a pretzel. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you
Well,
notice he's holding a Pils glass. That's very strange. Why would you drink this out of a Pils?
I feel justified eating my pretzels this episode. They told me to. The devil told me to eat pretzels.
Is there anything to the Kirta part of it? Like, is that a description of the type of beer, or is that
I
like
didn't research it. Let me see if I can pull any information up right now. Carefully, because if I do this wrong, it's gonna show up in the wrong spot.
I thought
we
that was
love
just
putting
part
it
of
on the
the.
spot?
Wasn't it like? That's not part of the brewery's name because it's repeated all across the top of the can too.
Oh.
So that doesn't mean it doesn't mean something.
I mean, so to me, Kirta sounds like an Indian base. It doesn't sound German to me.
Yeah, it's
Like,
brewed. It's brewed and owned by Graminger Weissbrau.
like usually, like most of the words in these cans have been, stereotypically German words, but Kirta stood out to me because it's like that sounds less German than all the other words on the can.
Yeah, Kirta is probably the closest thing to the proper name for the beer, but I'm not getting anything about what it means.
That's fine. Just a random thought. Sorry, Travis. I don't know if you've been able to give your thoughts on the beer yet. Besides that, it's good with pretzels.
Well, but I think that ties into Andrew's point. Like maybe the saltiness of the pretzels is cutting through some of the sweetness. Although I think I don't know, I guess the carbs basically from the pretzels makes it feel a little heavier too. So it's a catch-22. Like the salt cuts the sweetness, but then the carbs, like I like eating the pretzels when we're drinking all these super light beers, right? Because they kind of, I don't know, they kind of go together for me. Not so much with darker beers, I guess.
You're getting a full meal experience at that point.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel full.
Yeah, I mean, I could see. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it's why at pubs they give you pretzels, right?
Well,
So
I think I've mentioned
so they
this
don't.
before as well. That historically they would give you salty food like pretzels or peanuts because it makes you
Make you
thirsty and you'll drink more beer.
But like, I'm trying to think, just for like stereotypical dark beer. If you go to like an Irish pub, I don't think they're giving you pretzels though.
No,
They're giving
it
you
usually be
potatoes.
salted peanuts.
Yeah, like that. But peanuts aren't the they aren't the same carbs as having pretzels, right? Like,
Well, peanuts are fats.
right. So it's gonna work. It's gonna work differently with a darker, heavier beer, I think. I know we had a Scotch tasting, and the guy went. I know Scotch and beer are different, but since we had the smoky beer yesterday, it was still on my mind, and like he usually do with wine, but there's also like food tastings kind of with Scotch. And I've always wanted to go to like an actual beer food tasting. I know you can sometimes even like Red Lobster has it on their menu. Like, we suggest this beer with this with this food. I'm like, all right.
So,
That's all I
pal, how are you doing with your consumption? I know you're a little encumbered.
I'm doing better than Travis and his Santa hat.
Oh, you're
have.
finished.
Oh,
Wonderful.
Yeah, look at that.
I have a little bit more left to go.
I don't think that bodes well for Andrew's thumb.
It's really hard to drink this one with alacrity. I mean, it's filling and sweet, right? This is not something you can pound. It's not a light and crisp beer where you drink it quickly and are happy to move on.
This one's a little bit of a tough one.
Are we ready for some thumbs?
I've been ready.
You were born ready.
I feel like the fact that who until about 10 seconds ago, had a baby on my lap and finished drinking before you two, I feel like I can predict the score here. Although Travis is making me think maybe not.
I'm very on the fence about this one. So that's tipping my hand of whichever way I go is going to not be a very, very strong vote either way.
I think I know my vote. And it seems to me like usually when it takes you guys a long time to finish, it's a thumbs down. But do you need more time to think, Travis? Should we filibuster?
No, we should just go. But of course, then you got me thinking about like, it can go the other way too, right? If it's something you really like, you stretch it out to savor it because you don't want to. You don't want to.
Clearly the case for you, right?
Hey, the Zelda beer took me a while. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I have to go watch that one. I might have been the last one to finish that one because I was like, I don't want this to end.
Yeah, but you were very obvious throughout. Like, oh my god, this is an orgasmic experience.
That was love at first sip.
Yeah, I think it's love at first sight. Honestly,
I should probably start calling it Ladenburger rather than the Zelda beer.
The problem is just like the Landgang and then Ladenburger, and there's a lot of them that sound similar to it.
Yeah, I mean, for our purposes, the Zelda beer, we know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's the banana beer.
Go watch episode 12? I believe it was the midpoint.
That sounds about right.
I would have to look it up.
Yeah, I think you're right. Midpoint.
All right, I think Nintendo has a marketing opportunity there too.
all right, Santa, you ready to vote? All right. 3, 2, 1. Oh wait. I was in the wrong direction.
It's only 5%, Paul.
I know. What can I say? I'll go first. I liked it. I like cream soda, and like I said, it reminded me of cream soda. I guess maybe it's the sweetness. Kind of going along with what we said yesterday, though, or what I said yesterday. I don't know if you agreed with me or not. This tasted different, right? It was different from a lot of the pilsners we had. It was different from a lot of the hells we've had. In my opinion, at least, it was a different type of beer, and I enjoyed it. And if I went to a bar and ordered it, I would probably order another one. It didn't feel too heavy. It wasn't crisp and refreshing. That I wouldn't say it was that. It was definitely, it had more flavor. And it was not, but it wasn't too heavy, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't something I struggled to finish. I was the first to finish, and it was something that I would order again.
I have a sweet tooth. That's the simplest reason that I enjoy this. I think I like the sweetness of it, not just because it's sweet and a good beer, but it reminds me of a beer I drank in Germany. I went to dinner one night and ordered a Dunkel, and it came out as a very, very sweet Dunkel that they had there that night. And this just took me right back. It was like being in Germany all over again, and it felt right. Again, this is something that I don't want to have all of the time, but as a representative of a beer class that I tend not to like, Hefeweizen, it really hit everything that I could possibly want it to hit.
Travis, why are you wrong?
Well, like I said, it was going to be weak either way. So I mean, it's a weak thumbs down. But I think I just have to go kind of to your point. Like I struggled. I thought I was going to struggle with the smoked beer yesterday, but I think I struggled more with this one. And I know Andrew said, I think it was Andrew said wasn't that heavy. Like I don't know, for some reason it felt heavier. Maybe because I am eating the pretzels. I don't know. Backfired on me today.
It feels a little bit heavier than certainly than our light beers, and that's to be expected. This is not a less filling light beer. This is a full bodied, full flavor beer. It just happens to be sweeter.
Yeah, and I'm trying. You keep saying sweet, and I'm trying to think like if there's, because I've said before repeatedly, I don't like bitter or hoppy beers. So you think that would mean I would like sweet beers? Maybe this was just
Too sweet.
too much over the sweet line for me. I don't know. I feel like maybe I keep saying if I was not eating pretzels, I feel like maybe if I was eating something, I can't think what. That's why I said I need to go to a beer pairing dinner of some kind. But like, I feel like if this was paired with some sort of food, I would have liked it better to balance it out more.
Maybe some barbecue. No?
That might be sweet on sweet. I don't know. It depends what barbecue sauce you have, I guess, right?
Well, let me ask you this: a little behind the scenes, pulling back the curtain. You had expressed that you were excited about this beer beforehand, and so could it be an instance where expectations were not quite met, and as a result, you were a little disappointed? Because I will say that happens to me all the time with movies. If I'm super excited about a movie and I think it's going to be like a 10 out of 10, and I go to see it and it only ends up being like an 8 out of 10, it will feel like a terrible movie to me, even though it was still an 8 out of 10.
I mean, it might. Yeah, I mean, I saw the word Dunkles and I got kind of excited, and then I saw Vice Beer and it's like, those don't go together. At least.
And you saw the naked devil eating a pretzel. Come on, we know they were.
Yeah, and I was like, there's my man. But
there's your man. Jeez. Wow. All right, Santa Hudson, born on Christmas.
I think you got to flip some of those letters around in Santa.
Oh man.
Satan.
Yeah, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it was not met expectations, and if I hadn't had those, maybe if it was another green can, maybe I wouldn't have had enough. Maybe I wouldn't have been expecting more.
Yeah, that's green's true. More. You see that more in nature, so maybe you're just a nature guy.
Okay, so I hate to take us back, but I found the thing that I was thinking I'd forgotten, the thing I couldn't remember why I was wanting to continue to have the discussion, my Wildcat strike issue. Wildcat.
Keep going back to that.
I wanted to clarify Wildcat strikes being illegal. Paul had said, how can a strike be illegal? Well, if Wildcat strikes are the union members striking in spite of the union not authorizing it, that's where the illegality comes in. Wildcat strikes have been considered illegal in the United States since 1935. The 1932 Norris LaGuardia Act provided the clauses in labor contracts barring employees from joining unions were not enforceable, thus granting employees the right to unionize regardless of their workplace situation, and therefore prohibits this kind of wildcat striking activity. Typically speaking, though, even though it is illegal, it's not like anyone's going to suffer any criminal prosecution for doing so.
So if you're in a union and you strike
on your
own, that's illegal.
Yeah, but again, they're not going to prosecute you for it.
Okay.
So I was right in calling it illegal, but it's one of those things where it doesn't really matter.
Sounds like a giant mess to me. But
the totality of labor relations and humanity is a mess.
Humanity is a mess.
Yes.
That sounds like a very Andrew saying.
That is why we have beer.
Yes.
To make things less messy.
To make humanity slightly less messy. All right. Any other wise words of wisdom to drop on them?
I'm trying to figure out how to twist in peace on earth, goodwill towards man into
be excellent to one another.
What?
Be excellent to one another.
Be excellent to each other.
I'm not sure you can drop that literally 2 minutes after you're like, you should rearrange the letters in Santa to make. And then peace on earth, everybody. You gotta pick a lane and stick to it. The Satan clause.
No,
Whatever.
he's sneaky.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to gently massage that subscribe button and that like button. And we're getting close to the Christmas and to the end of the Advent calendar. So,
What's
hopefully you've
Satan
been
bringing
enjoying
you guys
this.
for Christmas?
Yeah, let us know in the comments. I guess after Christmas, but anyway, can't stop the discourse, even though you may sometimes want it to stop.
Bye, guys.